It was a bright and bustling afternoon at a local charity event in Orlando. Families gathered in the community center, children running around with laughter filling the air, while volunteers worked tirelessly to ensure everything went smoothly. Among them was one of the most recognizable figures in sports history, Shaquille O'Neal. Towering over the crowd with his larger than life presence, Shaq, as he was lovingly called by fans, spent his time signing autographs, taking pictures, and cracking jokes that sent waves of laughter through the room. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. Despite his fame, Shaq was known for his humility and generosity. He had made it a mission to give back to communities, often finding time to inspire young kids with his words and actions. That day, amidst the sea of adoring fans, there was one little girl who caught his attention. She wasn't jumping up and down for an autograph, nor was she rushing for a picture. Instead, she stood off to the side, her tiny hands clasped together, her face a mixture of nervousness and curiosity. Noticing her, Shaq bent down to her level and flashed a warm smile. "Hey there, little lady. What's your name?" The girl hesitated before answering, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lily." "Nice to meet you, Lily." Shaq's deep voice rumbled like a gentle giant's. "What's on your mind?" Lily took a deep breath, her wide brown eyes searching his face as if trying to find the courage to ask the question weighing heavily on her heart. Finally, she spoke. "Do you believe in God?" The question caught Shaq by surprise. In all his years meeting kids, he had been asked about basketball, fame, money, but never this. He saw the sincerity in her eyes, the way she clung to his answer as though it mattered more than anything else in the world. He knelt down completely, resting one massive hand on his knee. "That's a great question," he said thoughtfully. "Yes, I do. I believe in God with all my heart." Lily's lips quivered, but she continued. "But how do you know he's real? My mommy says he is, but my daddy says he's just a story. Sometimes I pray, but I don't know if he hears me. I don't even know if he sees me." Shaq's heart clenched. He had faced countless challenges in his life, poverty, loss, injuries, setbacks, but in that moment he realized the hardest battles weren't always fought on the court. Sometimes they were fought in the minds and hearts of little children searching for answers in a confusing world. He took a deep breath and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Lily, let me tell you something. When I was a little boy, I didn't always have the best. My family didn't have a lot of money, and there were times when things got really tough. But you know what? My mama always told me to pray, to believe, even when I couldn't see the answers right away." Lily listened intently, her fingers twisting in her dress. "There were days I wondered just like you," Shaq continued, his voice soft yet firm. "But the older I got, the more I saw how God works, not in big, loud ways all the time. Sometimes he shows up in the little things. A kind word from a stranger, a hug from someone who loves you, or even a chance meeting like this, where we get to talk about something so important." Lily's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "But what if I don't hear him?" she whispered. Shaq smiled, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a gold chain with a small cross on it. He held it up so she could see. "You see this? My mom gave it to me when I was just a little older than you. She told me that even when I can't hear God, I can trust that he's listening. That's faith, believing even when you can't see or hear." Lily reached out hesitantly, her tiny fingers brushing against the cool metal. "So, he's always there?" "Always," Shaq assured her. "He's in the love your mommy has for you, in the way the sun shines every morning, in the kindness of people around you. Even in the hard times, he's there, watching over you, guiding you. You just have to trust him." Tears finally slipped down Lily's cheeks. She didn't sob, but a single drop rolled down her face, her heart absorbing the words like a seed planted deep in the soil. "Thank you," she whispered. Shaq wiped the tear from her cheek gently. "You're welcome, little lady." Then, in a move that sent a ripple of warmth through the crowd, he took the chain off and placed it in her palm. "This is for you, a reminder that you're never alone." Lily gasped, looking up at him with wonder. "Really?" "Really," Shaq said with a nod. "But promise me something." She nodded eagerly. "Whenever you feel lost, hold on to that, and remember, God is always listening." Lily clutched the chain tightly, as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. Then, without hesitation, she threw her arms around Shaq's massive shoulders in a tight hug, The moment was so pure, so filled with emotion, that even those watching felt their own eyes sting with unshed tears. As the event continued, Shaq went on to greet more fans, sign more autographs, and spread more joy. But something about that exchange stayed with him long after the day was over. That night, as he lay in bed, he thought about Lily and the question she had asked. He realized that sometimes the most profound conversations don't happen in interviews or speeches. They happen in small, quiet moments, when a child asks a simple question and a giant answers with his heart. Somewhere in a little home, Lily lay in her bed, the cross necklace still clutched in her tiny hand. She had prayed that night, not with doubt, but with faith, because for the first time, she truly believed God was listening. And that was enough. Shaquille O'Neal lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling of his home. The encounter with Lily played over and over in his mind like a highlight reel from his basketball days. He had met thousands of fans, signed more autographs than he could count, and posed for endless photos, but something about this moment was different. There had been a weight in Lily's voice, a raw vulnerability that reminded him of something deeply personal, his own moments of doubt as a child. Long before he was a basketball star, before he had money, fame, or influence, he had been just another kid trying to find his way in a world that often felt confusing. He had grown up in a military household, disciplined and structured, but faith had always been present. His mother, Lucille, had been the pillar of that faith. Whenever he struggled, whenever he felt lost, she had always reminded him, "Trust God, baby. He's got a plan for you." But there had been times, especially as a teenager, when he had questioned that. He had watched friends go down the wrong path, seen pain and loss in the world, and wondered, where is God in all of this? Just like Lily, he had searched for signs, for proof, for something undeniable. And just like he had told her, he had come to realize that God wasn't always about grand, miraculous moments. Sometimes he was in the small, quiet things, a mother's prayer, a stranger's kindness, an opportunity that seemed to come out of nowhere. Shaq sat up in bed, rubbing his face, and decided he needed to do something more. It wasn't enough to simply answer Lily's question and walk away. He had a platform, and he wanted to use it. The very next day, he called a friend who worked at a youth center in downtown Atlanta. "I want to do something," Shaq said, his voice filled with determination. "Something bigger than just showing up at events. I want to talk to kids about faith, about hope. I want them to know they're not alone." His friend, an old college teammate who had become a community leader, immediately understood. "Let's set it up," he said. "We'll gather kids, open up the space, and just have a real conversation." A week later, Shaq found himself standing in front of a packed room at the youth center. Kids of all ages sat cross-legged on the floor, their eyes wide with excitement. Some had come just to see their basketball hero. But Shaq knew this wasn't about sports today. He cleared his throat and began. "I want to talk to y'all about something real," he said. "Something that goes beyond basketball, beyond fame, beyond money." The room grew quiet, the energy shifting from excitement to anticipation. "A little girl asked me something the other day," Shaq continued. "She asked me if I believe in God. And then she asked me how I know He's real." A murmur went through the crowd. Some kids nodded, while others looked down, as if wrestling with the same question themselves. "You know what I told her?" Shaq asked, his deep voice steady. "I told her that God isn't always loud. He's not always in burning bushes or booming voices from the sky, but He's there, in every breath you take, in every time someone helps you when you need it, in every moment you feel love." A boy in the front, no older than 12, raised his hand hesitantly. "But what if bad things happen? Does that mean He's not there?" Shaq exhaled slowly, nodding. "That's a fair question," he said. "A hard one. Bad things do happen. Sometimes life isn't fair. I've lost people I loved. I've had times where I felt like I was falling and nobody was there to catch me. But looking back, I see that even in those moments, I wasn't alone. Sometimes the hard things are what make us stronger. They shape us, teach us, prepare us for what's coming next." He looked around the room, making eye contact with as many kids as possible. "God isn't a magic trick that makes life perfect, but He's the strength that gets you through it. He's the reason you get back up when you fall." Silence hung in the air for a moment. Then a teenage girl in the back wiped her eyes. I used to pray, she admitted. But then my mom got sick and I stopped. I thought, if God was real, why didn't he fix it? Shaq walked over, kneeling in front of her, just like he had with Lily. I won't lie to you, he said gently. I don't have all the answers. Nobody does. But I do know this. God doesn't promise us a life without pain. He promises that we don't have to face it alone. The girl sniffled, nodding slightly. Shaq straightened and clapped his hands together. Let me tell y'all something, he said. When I was in the NBA, I had coaches who pushed me hard. I didn't always like it. Sometimes I was tired, sometimes I wanted to quit. But they weren't being hard on me to punish me. They were preparing me, training me to be better, stronger. Life does the same thing. Every challenge, every struggle, it's training. It's making you into the person you're meant to be. A slow understanding dawned in the faces around him. You might not see it now, Shaq continued, but every time you keep going, every time you choose faith over fear, you're winning. And trust me, God sees you. Even if you don't hear him, even if you don't feel him, he's there. Afterward, as Shaq shook hands and gave hugs, one of the organizers pulled him aside. That was powerful, she said. You just planted something in these kids that will last forever. Shaq simply nodded. He didn't do it for recognition or applause. He did it because he had seen something in Lily's eyes that day. The same search for meaning he had once felt. And now, he saw it in these kids too. Later that evening, as Shaq sat alone in his car, he reached for his phone and sent a message to his mother. Mama, I did what you always told me to do. I tried to be a light today. A few minutes later, her response came back. Proud of you, baby. Keep shining. God sees you too. Shaq smiled, feeling a peace settle over him. And somewhere, in a little home, a little girl named Lily still clutched a small cross necklace as she whispered a quiet prayer, knowing now, without a doubt, that she was heard. A few weeks passed, but Shaq couldn't shake the feeling that his encounter with Lily had set something in motion. It was more than just a touching moment. It was a reminder that people, especially kids, were searching for something greater than themselves. They were searching for hope, for reassurance, for proof that they mattered. One evening, Shaq found himself in his home gym, working through a set of weights. He had spent years refining his physical strength, but the kind of strength Lily had asked about wasn't something you could build with dumbbells. It was a different kind of muscle, one that needed faith, persistence, and a willingness to trust in something unseen. As he set the weights down, he reached for his phone and dialed an old friend, Pastor Jamal Rivers, who had been a mentor to him for years. When the pastor answered, his voice was warm, familiar. Shaq, my brother, what's on your mind? I got a question for you, Pastor, Shaq said, wiping sweat from his forehead. How do you help someone believe in God when they're struggling to see him? There was a pause on the other end before Pastor Rivers spoke. You meet them where they are, big fella. You don't throw Bible verses at them. You don't preach down to them. You show them. You remind them that God moves through people, through kindness, through love. You be the proof they're looking for. Shaq nodded to himself. That's what I want to do, but I don't want it to be just words. I want action. Pastor Rivers chuckled. Then take action, my brother. You've got a platform. Use it. And that's exactly what Shaq did. Shaq started small. He quietly visited more youth centers, showing up unannounced, sitting down with kids who needed someone to listen. He met a boy named Andre, who had lost his father and was angry at the world. He met a girl named Sophia, who had been in and out of foster homes and didn't trust anyone. Each time, he didn't just talk, he listened. Word spread quickly. More and more kids started showing up, eager to talk to the giant basketball player who wasn't just there for a photo op but actually cared. Shaq knew that he couldn't change the world overnight, but he could plant seeds, just like his mother had done for him when he was a child. One evening, as he was leaving a center in Miami, a teenage boy jogged up to him. He was tall, lanky, with a hesitant expression on his face. Hey, Shaq, he said, stuffing his hands in his pockets. What's up, big man? Shaq replied. I just wanted to say thanks, the boy muttered. I never really thought about God before. Thought he didn't care about people like me. But you said something the other day about how he shows up in little ways, and I think I saw that today. A teacher stayed after class just to help me with my work. Nobody's ever done that for me before, so, maybe you're right. Shaq smiled, patting the kid on the shoulder. I know I'm right. And just you wait. God's not done showing up in your life. What started as quiet visits soon turned into something much larger. The media caught wind of what Shaq was doing, not just giving away shoes or paying for groceries, which he often did, but personally mentoring kids, answering their deepest questions about faith and purpose. TV networks reached out, asking for interviews, but Shaq declined most of them. This wasn't about publicity, it was about impact. Instead, he doubled down. He partnered with churches, schools, and community leaders, organizing gatherings where young people could come together, share their struggles, and talk openly about faith. He made sure there were counselors and mentors present, people trained to help those who needed more than just words of encouragement. One of the biggest events took place in Los Angeles. Thousands of kids and teens showed up, eager to hear from Shaq and the panel of speakers he had assembled: pastors, athletes, musicians, and everyday people who had experienced their own struggles and found faith through it. On stage, Shaq held up his massive hands and said, "Y'all see these hands? Big, right?" Laughter rippled through the crowd. But let me tell you something. No matter how big my hands are, they're not as big as God's. And He's holding you in His hands every single day. The cheers were deafening. Months passed, and Shaq's movement continued to grow. But one day, he received a letter that stopped him in his tracks. It was from Lily. "Dear Shaq, I don't know if you remember me, but I'm the girl who asked you about God that day at the charity event. I just wanted to tell you something. I've been praying more. I've been trying to see God in the little things, like you said. And you were right. He is there. My dad and I have been talking more, and he even started going to church with me and Mom sometimes. I don't feel so alone anymore. Thank you for answering my question that day. It changed everything." Love, Lily. Shaq sat in his car for a long time holding the letter, a lump forming in his throat. He had always known that words had power, but this was something else. That weekend, he made a trip back to Orlando and reached out to Lily's family. When they invited him over, Lily's mother met him at the door, tears in her eyes. "You don't know what you did for my little girl," she whispered. Inside, Lily ran to him, her small cross necklace still hanging around her neck. "Shaq!" she squealed. "I knew you'd come." He scooped her up effortlessly, laughing. "Of course I did. I had to check in on my little theologian." That evening, as they sat on the porch, Lily asked, "Do you think God is proud of me?" Shaq smiled, his heart full. "Lily, I think God is beaming with pride, and I know for sure He's got big plans for you." As the years went by, Shaq's movement only grew. He launched a foundation focused not just on scholarships and mentorship, but on faith-based leadership programs for young people. His message remained the same. God is always there, even when you can't see Him. And sometimes, the proof you're looking for is in the kindness of a stranger, the love of a family member, or the unexpected blessings that show up in life's hardest moments. One day, many years later, Shaq received another letter. This time, it was from a college student named Lily who was preparing to graduate. "Dear Shaq, it's me again. I just wanted to tell you, I'm going to be a teacher. I want to help kids the way you helped me. And I want them to know what you taught me all those years ago, that they are never alone. Thank you for changing my life. With love." Lily. Shaq stared at the letter for a long time, tears in his eyes. He knew without a doubt that this was why he had been put on this earth. Not just to play basketball, not just to entertain, but to plant seeds of faith in the hearts of people who needed it most. That night, he looked up at the sky, smiled, and whispered, "Thank you, God. I hear you loud and clear." Shaq sat on his porch, the cool night air settling around him. The stars stretched endlessly above. Tiny lights scattered across the vast sky, reminding him of something his mother had told him long ago. Every star in the sky is proof that God is watching over us. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking it all in. The journey he had been on, the lives he had touched, the people who had unknowingly changed his life in return. His phone buzzed beside him. Another message, another testimony. "Shaq, I just wanted to say thank you. I came to one of your events feeling broken. I was angry at the world, angry at God. But after hearing you speak, I decided to give faith one more chance. And now, my life is different. I see the little ways God moves. I know I have a purpose. Thank you for being the one who helped me see that." He let out a deep breath, his heart swelling. It never ceased to amaze him how one moment, one conversation, could change the trajectory of someone's life. The seed he had planted in Lily had grown, and now it was spreading. She had taken what he taught her and was passing it on to others. That was the beauty of faith. It wasn't something to be kept to oneself. It was meant to be shared, to be given freely, to be multiplied. Shaq knew his platform was a gift. He had once thought that basketball was his purpose, that winning championships and entertaining millions was the height of his impact. But now he understood. His real legacy wasn't in points scored or trophies lifted. It was in the quiet, unseen moments where he reminded people that they were loved, that they mattered, that God was always there. The next morning, he sat down with his team. "I want to go bigger," he said. They exchanged glances. "Bigger than what you're already doing?" one of them asked, eyebrows raised. Shaq nodded. "We're reaching kids in the cities, but what about the ones in small towns? The ones who don't have community centers, who feel forgotten? I want to take this nationwide, no, worldwide." And so, the Faith Tour was born. It started as a series of small gatherings, but it quickly became something extraordinary. Arenas that once held basketball games now held thousands of young people coming together to talk about faith, to share their struggles, to find hope. Shaq brought in speakers, musicians, pastors, and mentors. It wasn't just about religion, it was about connection. And at every event, he told Lily's story. At every event, he reminded them that faith didn't have to be complicated. It wasn't about having all the answers. It was about trusting that even in the unknown, even in the silence, God was still there. And somewhere, in another town, another little girl or boy sat in the crowd listening, searching, and finding the hope they never knew they needed. As the Faith Tour gained momentum, Shaq found himself traveling across the country, speaking in places he never thought he would. He visited small towns tucked away in the heart of America, places where kids had never dreamed they'd see an NBA legend standing in front of them, speaking not about basketball, but about something much deeper: faith, hope, and resilience. One night in a quiet town in Tennessee, he stood on a modest stage in a high school gymnasium, looking out at a sea of young faces. Some were excited, some were skeptical, but all were listening. The air was heavy with the kind of silence that meant people were truly absorbing every word. "You ever feel like you don't matter?" Shaq asked, his voice echoing in the gym. "Like you're just another face in the crowd, like if you disappeared, nobody would notice?" A few kids nodded. Others looked down, too afraid to admit it. "I felt like that once, too," he continued. "Yeah, even me. The big, strong, unstoppable Shaq. There was a time when I wondered if I was really meant for something greater. If God saw me. If I mattered." The room was still. "But let me tell you something. Every single one of you has a purpose. Every single one of you is seen. Even if you don't feel it right now. Even if you're going through something so dark that you don't know if you'll ever come out the other side, God sees you. He's already got plans for you that you can't even imagine yet." A girl near the front suddenly broke down in tears. She buried her face in her hands, trying to hide, but Shaq saw her. Without hesitation, he stepped off the stage and knelt beside her. "You okay, sweetheart?" he asked gently. She shook her head, her shoulders trembling. "You want to talk about it?" he asked. Through choked sobs, she whispered, "I don't think I can keep going. My family's falling apart. My dad left. My mom's barely holding on. I feel like I'm invisible." Shaq swallowed the lump in his throat. He had met so many kids like this. Kids carrying burdens too heavy for their small shoulders. He took a deep breath. "Let me tell you something, okay? You are not invisible. You are not forgotten. And you are not alone." The girl lifted her tear-streaked face, searching his expression for any sign of doubt. "You see, when I was a kid, my stepfather was in the military," Shaq told her. "We moved around a lot. I didn't always have friends, didn't always feel like I belonged. But my mom always told me something. God puts people in your life for a reason. Sometimes for a season, sometimes for a lifetime, but always for a reason. And I know that tonight, right here, right now, you were meant to be here. And I was meant to tell you this. You are loved, you are worthy, and you are going to make it through this." The girl let out a shaky breath, and before she could even think about it, she threw her arms around Shaq. The crowd around them watched, silent, moved beyond words. That night, after the event ended, Shaq made sure to connect the girl with a local pastor and a counselor who could support her beyond just that moment. He knew that words alone weren't always enough. Faith needed action. Love needed follow through. And that was what the Faith Tour was all about. As time passed, Shaq's mission expanded beyond the United States. Invitations began pouring in from all over the world: schools in Africa, youth centers in South America, struggling communities in Europe and Asia. Each place had its own stories, its own struggles, but the questions were always the same. Does God see me? Do I matter? Can I find hope? One of the most powerful moments of the tour happened in Brazil. Shaq had been invited to speak at a school in one of the poorest neighborhoods in Rio de Janeiro. The school had been struggling, resources were scarce, and many of the kids were caught in the middle of dangerous gang violence. The principal told Shaq that some of the children had lost parents, siblings, or friends to the streets. Many of them had lost their belief in anything good. When Shaq arrived, the children were hesitant. They had seen celebrities before, people who took pictures, made promises, and left. They weren't expecting anything different. But Shaq wasn't there to be a celebrity, he was there to be present. He sat on the floor with the kids, he listened to their stories. He asked them about their dreams. "Do you believe in God?" one boy finally asked him, much like Lily had done all those months ago. Shaq smiled. "I do," he said, "and I believe in you too." The boy looked down. "God doesn't come here. If he did, my brother would still be alive." Shaq felt the weight of those words. "I won't pretend to understand your pain," he said honestly, "but I do know this. Sometimes the fact that we survive the hardest things means God is right there holding us up. Sometimes he puts people in our path to remind us that we are not alone. Maybe that's why I'm here today." The boy didn't say anything right away. But later, when Shaq was leaving, he tugged at his sleeve. "Will you come back?" he asked. Shaq smiled. "You bet I will." And he did. He came back again and again, helping fund programs for the school, making sure the kids had food, books, and mentors. Because faith wasn't just about words, it was about showing up. Years passed, and the Faith Tour became more than just an event. It became a movement. Churches, schools, and organizations across the world began implementing mentorship programs inspired by Shaq's mission. Athletes, musicians, and leaders stepped up to join him, using their platforms to spread hope. One evening, after a long day of speaking at an event in Chicago, Shaq received a message that stopped him in his tracks. "Dear Shaq, I don't know if you remember me, but I met you years ago when you came to my school in Brazil. I was the boy who told you that God didn't come to my neighborhood. I just wanted you to know, I see him now, in the people who helped me, in the way my life changed after that day. I'm studying to become a teacher now. I want to help kids the way you helped me. Thank you for never giving up on us." Shaq exhaled, his chest tightening with emotion. He had played in the NBA, won championships, built businesses, but nothing compared to this. As he stared at the message, he thought of Lily. He thought of the girl in Tennessee. He thought of every child who had asked the same question, searching for the same answer. And he knew, without a doubt, that his work was just beginning. Because as long as there were kids searching for faith, for hope, for proof that they mattered, Shaq would be there, standing tall, reminding them that they were never alone. And somewhere across the world, a little girl or boy was whispering a prayer they never thought they'd say, because someone had finally told them they were seen, they were loved, and they were heard. As Shaq sat in his quiet home, reflecting on the countless lives he had touched, he realized something profound. His journey had come full circle. The questions he once asked as a child, the doubts he carried, had now become the very thing that fueled his mission. He had once sought answers, and now he was the one offering them. Late one evening, he received a video message from a group of kids in a small village in Kenya. They stood together, smiling, holding up a banner that read, "Thank you, Shaq. You showed us we are seen." One by one, they shared their stories, how they had started praying again, how they had found mentors who cared, how they had begun to believe in something greater than themselves. Shaq leaned back, his eyes brimming with emotion. The world was vast, filled with pain and uncertainty, but it was also filled with hope, with resilience, with the undeniable power of faith. And as long as there were voices crying out in the dark, he would be there, answering, reassuring and reminding them that no matter what, they were never alone. This was his purpose, and he would never stop. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on a little girl asking Shaq about God? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.